In the last video, we looked at the history of the discovery of cells and then the two main different types of cells, the prokaryotes and the eukaryotes. And today we're going to focus on the structures found in the eukaryote cells because there are quite a few of them actually. So to review from the last video, the cell membrane, it wraps around the cell and encloses its cytoplasm. It forms that barrier between the inside of the cell and the outside of the cell. Remember, when we see the word function, it tells you the job of that organelle. And so the job of the cell membrane is to protect and support the cell. It also controls, so this is another job, what leaves and enters the cell, and it will only let certain substances pass through, and that helps keep that's part of the protect part of its jobs. It only lets the good things in and the bad things out. So when we look at the cell membrane, we're going to see that it's made up of two layers of what we call phospholipids. So each one of these is a single phospholipid. And there's two layers. As you can see, they kind of get divided here. One is up, the other is down. And when we look at each phospholipid, it has a head and then two tails that come off of it. So here's the head and then the tails. And the heads are what we call hydrophilic. So the prefix hydro means water, and the ending philic means loving. So the heads are water loving. They face the outer surfaces of the cell, and they point towards the watery cytoplasm within the cell. The tails, on the other hand, are hydrophobic. So again, the hydro means water, and phobic now means fearing. So the tails don't like water, and they're protected from the water because they point to the middle. So we have the hydrophilic heads in contact with the watery solutions, but then they protect these tails in the middle from that water. So the hydrophobic molecules like to be near other hydrophobic molecules. They fear being near hydrophilic molecules. So that means hydrophobic molecules can pass through the cell membrane because they like this hydrophobic interior. Other hydrophobic molecules or hydrophilic molecules like to be near hydrophilic, and so they like to hang out with these hydrophilic heads. So they can't pass through the cell membrane because they would get into this interior that doesn't like water. They're the hydrophobic region. So they end up staying on the outside or the inside of the cell. So then we have our cytoplasm. Again, we talked about this yesterday, how it's everything inside the cell membrane, but it does not include the nucleus. And then we have the cytosol, is that watery gel-like substance. Remember in the other video I said it was more like a jello-like. And then the water in the cytoplasm makes up about 2/3 of the cell's weight. So there's quite a bit of it. So what roles or jobs or functions does the cytoplasm? It suspends the cell organelles and it pushes against the cell membrane to help the cell keep its shape. It prevents it from collapsing, prevents the cell from collapsing in. And it also provides the site for many biochemical reactions in the cells. So a lot of our chemical reactions happen in that cytoplasm. All right, so now on to the new structures. So the first new structure is called the cytoskeleton, and these are crisscrossing thread-like filaments and tubules. Its job is to help the cell keep its shape. It will also hold organelles in place within the cytoplasm. And so when we look at the picture over here, these green things, see how they're thread-like? Those would be part of that cytoskeleton. They're holding structures and shape, as well as the red. They're part of the cytoskeleton. Then we have the nucleus. I think we talked about the nucleus a little bit in the other video. And this contains most of the cell's DNA. It is the largest organelle. And remember, the DNA contains the genetic code. And it tells the cell which proteins to make and when to make them. So deep inside the nucleus, we have this structure called the nucleolus. The nucleolus's job is to make ribosomes. Then on the outside, we have this nuclear envelope. And it's very similar to the plasma membrane because it surrounds the nucleus. It's like the skin of the nucleus. And then there's holes in it. You can see that there's holes. And we call those holes pores, kind of like the pores on your face. It's just another way of saying holes. So nuclear pores are holes in the nuclear envelope that allow substances to move into and out of the nucleus. Then we have the mitochondrion. A lot of times you'll just hear the word mitochondria, but that's the plural form. This is an organelle that makes energy available to the cell. Its nickname is the power plant. It really makes energy, and the energy it makes is called ATP, which stands for adenosine triphosphate. And this is energy that the cells can use. And so there are multiple mitochondria in a cell. And then cells that need lots of energy are going to have a lot of mitochondria. Cells that need just a little bit of energy are going to have fewer mitochondria. So when we look at our image, our mitochondria are right here. They kind of are shaped like a kidney bean almost. And here would be another one. And so the difference between these two mitochondria is this top one. They took the cover off of it, so to speak, so you could see inside. And you can see inside that mitochondria, we have this back and forth membrane. And so that's part of the inside of the mitochondria. Next, we have ribosomes. Again, I think we talked about ribosomes a little bit. And they are small organelles where proteins are made. And they gather amino acids and join them together to make those proteins. They are not surrounded by a membrane, so therefore they are not classified as an organelle. They can be free-floating in the cytoplasm, or they will attach to other organelles. And so if you look at this structure called the rough endoplasmic reticulum, you can see the darker blue dots on it, and those darker blue dots are the ribosomes. Or you could have ribosomes free-floating in the cytoplasm by themselves. Then we have our endoplasmic reticulum, and there are two types of endoplasmic reticulum, the rough and the smooth. The ER, or endoplasmic reticulum, is an organelle that helps make and transport proteins and lipids. They're folded membranes, so that by folded I mean that they go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. They have that kind of accordion style. Bits of the membrane can pinch off to form tiny sacs that we call vesicles, and then those vesicles can either bring the proteins or the lipids to other places in the cell. So looking at our rough endoplasmic reticulum, it's studded with the protein. So in this picture, studded with ribosomes. In this picture, the ribosomes are the pinkish reddish dots, and they help make proteins. And that makes sense because the ribosome's job is to make proteins. Then we have the smooth ER, and it's smooth because it doesn't have ribosomes, and it helps make lipids. And so there are those two types of endoplasmic reticulums, and they really differ in whether they have ribosomes or not, and then what they make, proteins versus lipids. Then we have the Golgi apparatus. The Golgi apparatus is here in the pinkish red. And this will always be by the endoplasmic reticulum. The Golgi apparatus is a large organelle that sends proteins and lipids to where they need to go. A lot of times people think of the Golgi apparatus as the post office because it receives molecules from the endoplasmic reticulum. It's going to package and label them, and then it sends them to where they're needed. And they can be needed in two different spots. One would be in different parts of the cell, or they could be needed outside of the cell. And so the Golgi apparatus really directs where these little packages go. And so small pieces of the membrane will pinch off the Golgi apparatus to enclose and transport those proteins and lipids to where they need to go. So kind of like the mailman. Vesicles and vacuoles. Vesicles are sac-like organelles, and the key thing here is they're smaller than a vacuole, and they have a variety of functions. One of their functions, or one of their jobs, is to store and transport substances, and the other job is to provide areas for biochemical reactions to happen. Vacuoles, very similar to vesicles, however, they're larger, and their main job is storage. And they can often isolate or trap harmful materials, so that way it protects the rest of the cell. Lysosomes, these are organelles that recycle unneeded molecules. They use enzymes to break down the molecules into their components. So I kind of think of these as like the cleanup crew. And if you think of Lysol, Lysol is a product that we humans use to clean. And so lysosomes clean up, just like Lysol. And then once the lysosomes break down the molecules, these components that they break them down into can be used to make new molecules. And again, there can be multiple lysosomes in a cell. And so here we have a lysosome shown. Like your saliva has a lot of lysosomes in it, the saliva cells, because one of the jobs of saliva is to start breaking down food. Centrioles are organelles that help organize DNA in the nucleus before a cell division takes place. These are only found in animal cells. This ensures that the DNA divides correctly when the cells divide. And I don't know if, right here, centrioles. And there's only usually ever a pair of them in a cell. So we would have a pair of centrioles. Now we'll talk about some special structures that are just found in plant cells. Plant cells have a cell wall, and this is a rigid layer that is on the outside of the cell membrane. It's mainly made up of a compound called cellulose, and its job is to support and protect the cell. There are tiny holes in it to allow substances in and out. Another cell structure that's special to just plants is a large central vacuole. So it's a vacuole, so it's for storage, but it's so big that it takes up 90% of the plant's total volume. It's like a large storage container for water, enzymes, and salts, and it also helps stems and leaves hold their shape. Occasionally, it can contain pigments to give flowers their colors. So pigments are like colors. Then we have the plastids. We have chloroplasts, chromoplasts, and leucoplasts. So 3 different plastids, each with unique jobs. Chloroplasts is a plastid that contains chlorophyll, and it's where photosynthesis takes place. And then chlorophyll is just the green pigment that gives plants their color. Chromoplasts contain other colored pigments that give fruits and flowers their colors. So if you see an orange flower, the chromoplast would contain an orange pigment. Then we have leucoplasts. And these plastids make or store other molecules. And so, for example, they could make amino acids or store starches and oils. So here's a picture of our plant cells. That cell wall is that darker green area, and where the yellow is the plasma membrane. So the cell wall is on the outside of the plasma membrane. Then we have the chloroplast, which is right here. I'll draw it in a different color. And remember, its job is to collect sunlight for photosynthesis. The other plastids are not pictured in this image.